Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us for our June 17th webinar. We are excited to have you all joining us today. This will be a really great presentation that Tammy has prepared for you all. A couple of housekeeping tips. Just remember that all of you participating will be on mute throughout the entire presentation. We do hope that if you have any questions, you will enter those in the question pane in your main dashboard in GoToWebinar. So please ask those. We will stick to the 30 minutes of our time for our presentation, and so we'll get to as many of those questions as we are able to. I also want to remind you that we've been doing these webinars for about a year, a little bit over a year, and so they provide a fabulous overview of some of the work that we're doing here at the St. Johns River Water Management District. So if you have questions about specific topics, go check out that website and the links of those webinars so that you're able to watch those recorded ones. With that, this webinar is also being recorded, and so if you have friends or colleagues that you think would really benefit from the content within this presentation, please do share that recording with them, and we hope that you enjoy today's presentation. So today, Tammy Bader-Gibbs, our Technical Program Manager in the Bureau of Water Supply Planning, will be presenting an overview about the annual water use reports. Tammy has over 20 years of working in Florida and has been at the St. Johns River Water Management District for the past 12 years. So I'm going to turn it over to Tammy and let her tell you all about the annual water use reports.
Okay, thank you, Jennifer, and good morning, everybody. Again, I'm Tammy Bader-Gibbs with the Bureau of Water Supply Planning, the St. Johns River Water Management District. Today, I will go over our annual reporting on water use data and its applications of use within our district. Since 1978, the district has published yearly reports of water use. These reports contain water use by population and category and by county. The reports also contain per capita information, which represent on average how much water one person would use during a day. We measure and report data for 6 water use categories. In 2019, our largest water use category remained public supply and represented approximately 55% of our total water use. Public supply water use in our district is water supplied by privately and publicly owned water supply utilities that have our consumptive use permits to withdraw equal to or greater to than 100,000 gallons per day. The district's second largest category is agriculture, making up 20%, which represents supplemental crop irrigation for those users that have their own dedicated well. The remaining 4 uses include commercial, industrial, institutional, and mining dewatering that also have their own dedicated well. This category includes our businesses, government facilities, military installations, schools, prisons, hospitals, and industrial uses such as processing and manufacturing and long-term mining and dewatering operations. Of note, water use for this category includes bottled watering. And a fun fact, bottled water use in our district typically ranges about 1 million gallons per day, or about 1/10 of 1% of the district's total water use. Landscape and recreation irrigation water use represents irrigation use for golf courses, urban landscapes, athletic fields, and other recreation areas. We also include power generation uses, which are power plants that have their own dedicated wells, and domestic self-supply. Our domestic self-supply category represents our residences that have their own wells and are not currently on a public supply system. Our 2019 report shows that water use in our district was 986 million gallons per day. 82% of this water is reported directly to our district via our consumptive use permitting process. The other 18% that we include in our annual reports typically consist of those users that are not required to report water use to the district. These include our small agriculture operations and our domestic self-supply systems. For our data included in the report, our district relies on a variety of sources. As shown in the previous slide, the majority of the water use is directly reported to our district. For the smaller estimated portions of water, we rely on monthly operating reports from the Florida Department of Environmental Protection and agriculture water use estimates developed by the Florida Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services via their yearly Florida Statewide Agriculture Irrigation Demands, or FSED, report. In addition to our 6 water use categories that I mentioned earlier, our district also tracks the use of reclaimed water, which is reported to the Florida Department of Environmental Protection and published in their yearly report of their annual water reuse. Water reuse involves taking domestic wastewater, giving it a high degree of treatment, and using the resulting high-quality reclaimed water for new and beneficial purposes. The use of reclaimed water in our district takes the place in many areas of traditional groundwater withdrawals used for irrigation. So what do we use the report for in our district? We use data in the report for water use and population estimates that we help in our consumptive use permitting reviews and resource evaluations. We're able to create historic trends and averages using water supply planning and formulating future water demand projections. Per capita data is used to target potential water conservation projects and cost share opportunities. And as you'll see in later slides, the water use information is also used in resource evaluations, such as minimum flows and levels, groundwater modeling, and development of any necessary prevention and recovery strategies. This graph shows our district's total fresh water use, which includes groundwater and surface water, since 1995. If we look at our trends over time, and since specifically 2013, the trends are fairly consistent, deviating by about 60 million gallons per day. Of note, our 2019 water use was 9% lower than the last 10-year average. If we look at our population, our total population has increased 11% during the last 10-year period. Our steady water use trends can be attributed to trends in agricultural water use, which include irrigation efficiency practices, the effects of rainfall and irrigation, the use of reclaimed water, and our water conservation practices throughout the district. In our district, over 217 million gallons per day of reclaimed water is used for beneficial purposes. If we didn't have this beneficial reuse in our district, you would see the water use on this graph jump up with the increased demand. In addition to our water use trends, the district also looks at per capita rate trends. Our per capita rate trends represent on average how much water one person would use during a typical day. Residential per capita rates represent uses for only residential homes, both indoor and outdoor uses, and have decreased since 164 in 1995 to the mid-80s in 2019 and 2020. Gross per capita has also decreased during this time period, last year being about 116 gallons per person per day. As with water use trends, many factors need to be taken into consideration when comparing per capita rates over time. Economic growth, rainfall during the year, increased conservation, and the use of reclaimed water all impact per capita rates. Although our district's gross per capita and our water use trends have trended downward or remain constant, we still have a lot of room for improvement. So what can we all do to help continue our trends while we increase our population growth? Although conserving water is easy, it is a personal decision and is largely a matter of changing long ingrained habits. Just a few conservation practices and options include retrofitting or replacing old toilets and appliances, Be sure to look for the WaterSense and Energy Star labels, as these are our most efficient appliances. Checking often for leaks and correcting them and fixing them, and reducing our shower time or washing full loads of laundry and dishes in our dishwasher. Another target area for water conservation is our outdoor irrigation. We estimate about 50% of public supply uses to be used for irrigation. If you're going to irrigate, make sure you install efficient irrigation systems, and again, regularly check the system for leaks and correct any of those leaks. Check your irrigation timers and be sure to set it to match the watering restrictions. And consider changing out your old irrigation controllers and install what is called a smart controller. These controllers use either weather-based data or soil moisture, and it can allow you to adjust your run times through an app on your smartphone. Depending on your typical use, you may be able to save 30 to 40% of your outdoor water use with a smart controller. And if reclaimed water is available in your area, consider irrigating with reclaimed water or find out how you can be connected to the reclaimed water system. Over the next couple of slides, we'll take a look at our water use at the station and parcel levels within our district. For our district, our term stations represent our groundwater wells and our surface water pumps. This slide shows our location in the state compared to the other water management districts. Our district covers over 12,000 square miles, and we're located in all part of 18 counties in Northeast and Central Florida. Looking at our groundwater and surface water stations, each yellow dot on this slide represents an active groundwater well or surface water pump. Each of these points has historical water use attributed to them, which then in turn feeds into our groundwater models and resource analyses. Having this level of spatial data is very important in areas where we have sensitive resources, such as lakes, and insists in our decisions when it comes to minimum flows and minimum levels and analyses. For perspective, one of these yellow dots on this slide could represent your own well at your home and water withdrawal if you have your own private well for domestic use. Represented in these yellow dots are over 200,000 domestic self-supply wells. Again, these domestic self-supply wells comprise 18% of the water use that we estimate on a yearly basis. Also from this map, the areas in light blue or gray, you can see the outline of water bodies within our district or areas where there are no stations. Expanding on our previous slide, here we've identified in red outline our water bodies with minimum flows and levels. And this is just one brief example of how our water use is used. So as you can see around these red areas that are delineated, each of these yellow dots has water use attributed to them, and in turn, future water demand projections. And we can see the impact that the water withdrawals have around these water bodies. If you would like to view our annual reports, they can be accessed on our webpage under Water Supply, then Water Use Data Management. And I'll switch to that briefly. Our 2020 water use report is anticipated to be published in mid-July. We will be taking our 2020 report to our July governing board for an information item. And at that time, that does conclude my presentation. I hope you'd enjoyed learning about our annual report. And I'll hand the webinar back over to Jennifer after I go to our website, who will facilitate any questions. Again, thank you for your participation today, and a big thank you to Jennifer for getting this webinar together for us.
Thank you so much, Tammy, for that fabulous presentation. I know everyone is excited about the 2020 water use report. I sure am. I love being able to share that information with those that I speak to as well, because it does really hone in on that fact that the individuals that live in our district, the people of our district, utilize a greatest amount of our water. And so it does provide that opportunity to remind us about how much we can conserve water and make an impact in shrinking our water use. The first question that has come in is for those domestic users with wells, how do you quantify or estimate the water use for those since they are not metered?
That's an excellent question. So one of the things we look at via our consumptive use permitting program, the utilities report to us during their permit review or modifications how much water they're using throughout their utility and their different use categories. One of those is residential water use, how much they bill to their residential customers. Using that amount, we can come up with a percentage within the county of how much we anticipate public supply is using for residential purpose, and we apply that percentage going forward, assuming that those people that have their own wells typically use water in the same pattern that somebody would on a utility.
That's great. So in the water use report, it breaks it down by county, right? In terms of the gross per capita and the residential per capita usage?
That's correct. Yes, it does.
Great. The next question, and I'm not sure if this falls under something that you will know about or if it's more with the permitting, but are there per capita limits required by special conditions in those water use permits that the district has or throughout the other regions? So are there specific per capitas that are trying to be met by consumptive use permits?
Yeah, currently in our consumptive use permitting, we do like to see per capita's gross per capita rates under 150 gallons per capita per day. Anything over that does have to be explained. Although when we are issuing permits, we do like to look at the most recent 5-year average. And if they're going to deviate from that 5-year average, we typically require them to explain why they've deviated from that average. We also look at the likewise gross per capita rates within the county and other like utilities.
So you had mentioned that about half of residential use of water and then that portion that made up the irrigation and aesthetics. One of the questions talks about, do you think that we can reduce irrigation usage, and what is being done to address that at the district?
I think we do a really great job through our consumptive use permitting program. We do a lot of outreach and education. I know your group does, Jennifer. We try to do that at the district, making sure people are checking their irrigation timers, following their watering restrictions, and just generally overall making sure you're irrigating properly, checking for leaks, and not using water when it's not necessary. Pay attention to what your lawn actually needs.
Yes. So if you are tuning in right now and you follow us on Facebook or on our social media, you may see those Waterless campaign ads come through. Share those with your social media to remind folks about the importance of Waterless and how important that is. The next question that has come in is the voluntary reporting an option for the 18%? Not sure exactly what that one was talking about, but it was maybe one of your slides had the different ways that it's reported.
Sure. I mean, we would definitely advocate for any agriculture uses or people that are on domestic self-supply. Anybody that wants to give us data that would enhance what we have, we would certainly accept voluntarily reported data. As I noted right now, we're only required via our consumptive use permitting program for those people that have permits over 100,000 gallons per day to report their metered data. But anything we get, we certainly would appreciate.
Wonderful. I had a question also about you mentioned the reclaimed water and how it is helping to meet some of the demands here within the district for irrigation, both in agriculture and typically with a lot of new construction. How do you think water use would have continued and like the total amount of water demand would have changed or may change in the future as we start looking at alternative water supplies?
Very good question. Our district is using, in certain areas, we're close to 100% beneficial use of reclaimed water. So some areas within our district are doing better than others for a variety of reasons. Overall, our district is close to 60% beneficial reuse as a whole. Without that use of reclaimed water replacing our traditional sources, you would see water use increase by, if not more than 200 million gallons per day of water use. And you would most likely see more systems being constrained and more impacts on our water bodies.
So can you reiterate again how the district utilizes the data that is that is contained within the water use reports for their water supply planning and minimum flows and levels?
Absolutely. So the data within our report, if you look at the report, it is a concise report. The data that goes to supporting that starts out at a very refined level at the station and parcel level. And with that, we sum it up to category and county. That data is used from everything, supporting our decisions in consumptive use permitting with our public supply permit reviews, taking a look at our historic trends of water use by permit, by county, taking a look at our per capita rates over time. A lot of times we'll take a look at a county within the district area and see which counties may have higher per capita rates and see if there's conservation programs we could target in those areas to try to reduce the conservation rates. With our more refined data, we put that into our groundwater modeling, which then in turns gets fed into our groundwater modeling programs, and the results can show any impacts or changes in aquifer levels and how we may be impacting not only currently, but into the future, any of our wetlands or natural systems and lakes.
Wonderful. There's a great question that comes in reminding us about with reuse that there are still some of those added, or not added, but nutrients such as nitrogen and phosphorus within that reuse. And so would it be looking for information from our utilities that are supplying that reuse of what those concentrations are within that water? I know it would fluctuate over time, but what would be your suggestion for that?
So we do use, one of the things that's really beneficial to us, a lot of our reclaimed water data we get from the Florida Department of Environmental Protection, which includes their flows at the plant level and their water quality. One of the things that really benefits our district when we get into locating projects or future projects is where specifically that flow is being sent to. So for instance, if a utility has a wastewater system and they're providing reclaimed water, it's beneficial to know how many homes they're irrigating and potentially where they're irrigating, so that we can target other areas. And then also if they're looking at maybe adding a future golf course, what impacts will we see or what benefits will we see if we provided reclaimed water in an area and took off a user. So that type of information is very useful.
Wonderful. The next question that I see is about the USGS reports water use data every 5 years for the country. Are these data that are used for water supply planning in the district?
Yes, that's a very good question. The United States Geological Service, they are currently on hiatus from publishing yearly or 5-year reports in the state of Florida. The Department of Environmental Protection has taken that over and looking at a path forward for the future. Part of their report, they actually reach out to all of the water management districts. The water management districts provide them that data, and then they publish a concise statewide report, which then feeds into their more encompassing reports for the country. But we do reference that a lot in water supply planning. Not all of the 5 water management districts publish yearly reports of water use data. So that is one of the tools we rely on when we're looking at other areas within the state.
Are there friendly competitions between the districts of who can have the least water use across their districts?
I do. I think the least water use and how quickly we can publish the reports from each other.
It's always good to have those friendly competitions. I know we also have the competitions about who can get the most municipalities within our districts to participate in the Water Conservation Month. So that's also a great way to remind folks about the importance of water conservation. There were a couple of questions about how can we be sure that people are conserving water in their yards. And honestly, I would say that's one of the really difficult things to be able to do, other than if there are getting their water from utilities. There are unique signatures of watering and irrigation. Some of our utilities, and Tammy, you may be able to address this, have those smart meters and are using a lot of automated data metering and reading so that they are able to alert residents if they might have leaks or things like that as well. Tammy, did I lose you? Looks like Tammy might be frozen. So I do appreciate you all participating today, and I hope that everyone has a great rest of your day. It looks like we're having some technical difficulties with Tammy's stream, but we have gotten to all the questions that you all had, and I hope that you have a great rest of your day. Thanks so much. Bye.